Has returned from a four-day visit to the United States, where he addressed the UN General Assembly and he held bilateral and plurilateral meetings with the leaders of the Quad, especially the host, the US President Joe Biden. And the Prime Minister also met Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, and he interacted with top CEOs from emerging fields, asking them to participate in India's growth story. We'll be putting all this into context. My name is MERKEL, and let's begin with the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi returns after a successful visit to the USA. He receives a rousing welcome at the airport. The Prime Minister expresses gratitude to the people. The BJP President JP Nadda says Prime Minister raised the country's stature. In his 81st edition of Mann Ki Baat program, Prime Minister Narendra Modi calls for making rivers pollution-free, appeals to link cleanliness with economic cleanliness, highlights that digital transactions have put a decisive stop to corruption. Vote counting begins in Germany's national election, and it's too close to call. SPD mounts a strong challenge to the retiring challenger Angela Merkel's Conservative Party, and the Chancellor Angela Merkel to step down after the polls after gloriously leading the country for 16 years. Women candidates win a majority of the seats in Iceland's election. Female candidates hold 33 seats in the 63-member parliament. Iceland's ruling left-right coalition strengthens its majority in the national election. Israeli troops kill at least 4 Hamas militants in gun battles during raids against one of the group's cells in the occupied West Bank. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett says that the operation was aimed against Hamas's men about to carry out terrorist attacks. The Union Home Minister Amit Shah chairs a high-level meeting with chief ministers of Naxal-affected states and says that the central government is committed to development of the affected areas. Joint efforts of the centre and the states have achieved great success in cracking down on left-wing extremism. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to launch Ayushman Bharat digital mission on Monday. The mission to create interoperability within the digital health ecosystem. Key components of Ayushman Bharat digital mission include a health ID for every citizen. Cyclone Gulab makes landfall. The India Meteorological Department upgrades rainfall warning to red alert from orange for Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. Prime Minister speaks to chief ministers of both states. Eastern Naval Command also on alert. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman addresses the 74th Annual General Meeting of the Indian Banks Association, asks the IBA to improve access of banking in every district through a rationalized approach and optimal utilization of digital technologies. Here's our top story. Prime Minister Narendra Modi returned to a rousing welcome from his visit to the United States this morning. The visit was historic in many ways and clearly enhanced India's profile on the world stage. Here's a report. Prime Minister Narendra Modi stepping out of Air India One after a non-stop long-haul flight from New York, concluding a 4-day action-packed non-stop visit to the US, a visit that has enhanced India's stature and profile on the world stage. At the UN, Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the 76th session of the General Assembly. PM Modi highlighted India's development based on democratic values and ethos. He contrasted it with countries that are enemies of humanity, promoting terrorism. On Afghanistan, PM Modi made his message loud and clear that terrorism cannot be permitted as a political weapon.
रिग्रेसिव थिंकिंग के साथ जो देश आतंकवाद का पॉलिटिकल टूल के रूप में इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं, उन्हें ये समझना होगा कि आतंकवाद उनके लिए भी उतना ही बड़ा खतरा है। ये सुनिश्चित किया जाना बहुत जरूरी है कि अफगानिस्तान की धरती का इस्तेमाल आतंकवाद फैलाने और आतंकी हमलों के लिए न हो।
PM Modi also highlighted India's growth story in the last few years, a process that is inclusive in all respects. In the last 7 years, more than 43 crore people have been connected to the banking system and more than 36 crore people covered by insurance securities. Ayushman Bharat provides free treatment to more than 50 crore people. Speaking to the world community, PM Modi highlighted how technology solutions were driving India's progress in the fight against COVID. The first India-made DNA COVID vaccine and India's willingness to help the rest of the world with vaccine Maitri. Prime Minister once again called for urgent reforms of the UN for the august body to continue to be relevant.
संयुक्त राष्ट्र को खुद को प्रासंगिक बनाए रखना है तो उसे अपनी इफेक्टिवनेस को सुधारना होगा, रिलायबिलिटी को बढ़ाना होगा। यूएन पर आज कई तरह के सवाल खड़े हो रहे हैं। इन सवाल को हमने क्लाइमेट क्राइसिस में देखा है, कोविड के दौरान देखा है, दुनिया के कई हिस्सों में चल रही प्रॉक्सी वॉर, आतंकवाद और अभी अफगानिस्तान के संकट ने इन सवालों को और गहरा कर दिया है।
PM Modi secured India's interests through a plurilateral forum like Quad. Leaders of India, the US, Australia and Japan met in person for the first time. They strengthened their partnership to promote a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region and also advanced cooperation in other areas, on corona vaccine, on climate change, on infrastructure development, a fellowship for science, technology, engineering and mathematics research in the US, and new and emerging technologies. Prime Minister Modi and President Biden held their first bilateral meeting since Biden took office in January. The two leaders talked for about 90 minutes, 30 minutes more than the scheduled time, showing the importance they both attach to the relationship. It received greater impetus with Prime Minister's 5T mantra: tradition, talent, technology, trade and trusteeship.
जब भारत और अमेरिका के संबंधों में मैं ट्रांसफॉर्मेटिव देख रहा हूं, तब मैं देख रहा हूं कि ट्रेडिशन, लोकतांत्रिक परंपराओं और मूल्यों को लेकर के जो हम जी रहे हैं और जिसके प्रति हम समर्पित हैं, हम कमिटेड हैं, वो ट्रेडिशन का अपना एक महात्म्य और अधिक बढ़ेगा।
US President Joe Biden also expressed his desire to take relations with India to the next level.
I think that's begun to come to pass, and today we're launching a new chapter in the history of US-Indian ties and taking on some of the toughest challenges we faced together, starting with a shared commitment to ending the COVID pandemic.
It is a fitting tribute to Prime Minister and India that the US handed over 157 artifacts and antiques that were stolen from India. These artifacts and antiques are from India's glorious religious traditions of Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism. Most date back to the period from the 11th century to the 14th century, some even before the Common Era. PM Modi has been urging foreign governments to return antiques and artifacts stolen from India, and clearly his campaign is paying dividends. Bureau Report, DD India. Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was given a grand welcome by the BJP after he returned to New Delhi. At a ceremony, the Prime Minister was felicitated by the BJP National President JP Nadda. PM Modi was presented with a scarf and with bouquets, each by the party President JP Nadda and the General Secretaries of the party Arun Singh and Arun Chugh, and also the former Health Minister Harsh Vardhan, as they welcomed him at the airport.
भारत माता की, भारत माता की, भारत माता की। आप सबका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। नमस्कार।
Well, the Prime Minister greeted the crowd at the airport, a large crowd which was waiting outside the airport to meet him. Well, the BJP National President J.P. Nadda said that the Prime Minister's successful visit to the United States proved that the world views India differently under the leadership of the Prime Minister. Referring to Prime Minister Modi's address at the UN General Assembly, J.P. Nadda said that he spoke like a statesman and his speech has made the country proud.
मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में दुनिया एक अलग दृष्टि से भारत को देखने लगी है। उनकी मुलाकात अमेरिका के उपराष्ट्रपति कमला हैरिस के साथ वैश्विक विषयों से लेकर के भारत के और अमेरिका के संबंधों को लेकर जिस बेबाकी के साथ हुई, जिस अंतःकरण के साथ हुई, वह स्पष्ट बताता है कि दुनिया के नजरों में मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में भारत बदल चुका है और भारत को बदली निगाहों से देखा जा रहा है।
So that brings us to our first In Focus discussion today, and we're going to be discussing this. The Prime Minister's US visit strengthening India's global outreach. And to discuss this, we have with us Mohan Kumar, former senior diplomat, and Professor Swarant Singh from the School of International Studies, JNU. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, so we know that the Prime Minister made a very strong a lot of great references in his speech at the UNGA. But you know, if we have to talk a little bit about China, the Prime Minister did talk about the origin of the COVID vaccine, and he also mentioned about the ease of doing business rankings, which now the World Bank is not able to present because of pressure from China. How significant are, you know, some of these clear and present or pretty clear signals given by the Prime Minister?
I think this was a consequential and successful visit by the Prime Minister, perhaps one of the most consequential.
Yes.
The country faced a triple security situation, in my view, one from Afghanistan, the other from Pakistan, and the third from China. So the strategic scenario or the challenge in our region was not easy. In terms of that, the first thing that the visit does is to give an opportunity for the Prime Minister to share the security perceptions that India has with some of the closest strategic partners. I think he met with the US President, obviously, but he also met with the Australian Prime Minister and the Japanese Prime Minister. These are important strategic partners. External Affairs Minister met with France as well. So I think an exchange of views on the security situation is important. We've also been able to gauge that India will be getting unmanned aerial vehicles and drones. Now, these all have to do with countering the security situation for India. So that's the first objective. It's important because it concerns India's national security. The second thing that the Prime Minister's visit accomplished, to my mind, is the trade and investment and infrastructure agenda. And there, I think, his meeting with the CEOs, his meeting in the context of the Quad, where there is now an agreement to develop infrastructure to rival the Belt Road Initiative of China. So I think this is the second basket where I think the visit was great in terms of pushing the agenda for trade, investment, infrastructure. The last basket, I think it's the global agenda, and your headline says global outreach. What better way for India than to really say we are going to be the factory the pharmacy of the world by saying we will resume vaccine exports. So COVID is the number one area where I think the Prime Minister's visit has been immensely successful. The second is climate change, where I think also India has been able to become part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. And finally, of course, India's emphasis and highlighting how terrorism is a scourge for everyone, not just for India. So those are the big ticket items in my view, and I think the visit has been immensely successful from my perspective.
Indeed. Professor Swaran Singh, when we look at what the Prime Minister said with regard to vaccines, in fact, he invited companies to start manufacturing vaccines in India. And this is important from the point of view also that, we've seen what COVID has done. And perhaps, if we can have preemptive a situation where we can actually, we already are the pharmacy of the world, but we are also the largest manufacturer of vaccines. And if we enhance this capability, what more can we do? What would you say, Professor?
Pandemic has definitely come as a challenge, but it has also become a great opportunity for India. The way India has projected itself and the way world is today engaging India in global fight against the pandemic puts India at a global scale in that sense. India doesn't go and address United Nations as a South Asian country, but goes there as a country that can really contribute to saving humanity from this pandemic. And in that sense, the scale and speed of India's engagement, and of course, the visibility that India has received with Prime Minister's visit. And we are hearing a total of about 24 meetings in that visit that took place. And particularly meetings that happened in one-to-one, whether it is companies' CEOs, which is where United States, which is already India's largest trading partner, is now, after 3 foundational agreements, opening doors to extremely advanced technologies to be transferred to India. Both in civilian sectors, but also in defense sectors. So India, again, reiterated being the major defense partner. In fact, United States is the biggest contributor to India's military modernization in that sense. Several deals have already happened and many more are still in pipeline. Those will move forward. And this historically, see, diplomacy has always been in-person style of communication in that sense. So pandemic, even if it had sort of shifted a lot of interactions to online platforms, this was a very bold move, I would say. If you look at the United Nations General Assembly, total number of national leaders addressing that assembly this time is 109, but only 49 are addressing it in person. And India is one of the major countries that presented itself and outlined its vision to address global challenges and how India can contribute, not just looking at its own individual problems as a country located in South Asia, but global issues, whether it is pandemic or it is climate change or it is terrorism. And one notices this increasing expectations that world has and the major powers today have from India in contributing to this global arrangement of post-COVID supply chains, post-COVID development trajectories, and a whole lot of new, very exhaustive details were added to, for example, the Quad joint statement, which was already fairly ambitious when it met online in March this year. And they have really moved much beyond there. So India is showcasing itself as a very different country today. And in that sense, the projection was very significant due to this visit.
And certainly India's stature has gone up, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, and we can see that, with the return of stolen goods, stolen artifacts, which belong to our heritage, 157 of them, dating back to the 11th century, and some even to before the Common Era. What do you think? I mean, how significant is this recognition of the fact that this is our ancient wealth?
Yes, I think the recognition of India and its image, as you rightly say, has also got to do with one brutal fact. And the fact is, you cannot solve the COVID problem worldwide without India supplying the vaccines. So that is the first. Second, you cannot tackle the climate change issue without India doing something about it, because we are such a big, large economy. We have now become a big greenhouse gas emitter as well. So what I'm trying to tell you is that some of the most pressing international problems, India's role is necessary if you want to have an effective solution worldwide. So that is a realization by India's strategic partners and India's own diplomacy of playing among the big boys or the big guys. I think that has been a coming of age, in my view, for this particular visit by the Prime Minister, where we are participating in the Quad, where we have discussions with the United States on various strategic aspects of our relationship. We are discussing problems which are international in character, whether it is COVID, climate change, or terrorism, and India's role in finding solution for these worldwide problems is acknowledged by the United States, Japan, Australia, and the large number of countries. So to me, that is the coming of age of India's diplomacy and a recognition by the international community that India matters when it comes to finding solutions for some of these pressing problems.
Professor Swaran Singh, but if India matters, then India has to play a bigger role, especially in the United Nations, in a reformed United Nations. And we can see that, the Foreign Secretary was asked several questions at his press briefing about that. He did say that, the U.S. Has also accepted that India should have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. He said that, many other countries have supported it. Portugal has supported it. The question is, how does this become a reality?
I think it is a difficult proposition for sure. But it is not that United Nations structures have not been reformed before. Within first 10 to 15 years, from 1945 to 1960-61, when the membership of United Nations had doubled from 50 to 100, UN Security Council was expanded from 10 to 15 members. The Economic and Social Council was expanded from 18 to 27 members. I think lately there have been a little reluctance on part of at least very definitely some of the major powers, and I can name it China very clearly among them. And China holds that veto power in case any reforms have to take place in the United Nations, particularly Security Council. But I also want to underline the fact that there is increasing endorsement of India, including from China, may not be very direct, very indirect and reluctant, reticent. But there is endorsement which is global now that India does need to play a greater role at the global level. And one after another great leaders, starting from almost a decade now, have been airing that sentiment that India should play a greater role. And one quick example that I love to give always is India is today sitting for 8th time as non-permanent member in UN Security Council. And in selection or election of India, for this time, 184 votes came in India's favor out of 193. So that shows the kind of endorsement in general that India has received around the world as to what kind of role world expects India to play. So in that sense, yes, structural changes may take some time, or I don't know when they will happen, but there is already much larger recognition around the world, and India is gradually finding its place. For example, in World Health Assembly, India is now the chair, and this is the time when World Health Organization is expected to transform itself. So again, expectation from India, fighting pandemic, and this may not be the last pandemic now. Things could happen again. Last 20 years have shown diseases are spreading much faster now. So World Health Organization has to become futuristic, and that was underlined by Prime Minister. The onus does not lie on India anymore, as he said. The onus lies on United Nations to stay relevant and contemporaneous. It has to represent the reality on the ground as it is today. So in that sense, I think gradually the onus and expectation is shifting to United Nations to stand up and recognize India's new role at the global level. And in that sense, these issues of pandemic, climate change, terrorism are showcasing that world needs India to be on the forefront to fight these fundamental existential challenges that the world community is facing today. And all major powers are beginning to recognize that. So India is the only country today, for example, which is not only most welcome in Quad, but equally welcome in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, among BRICS nations. And that kind of global acceptability for India, I think, showcases how major role India potentially is getting itself ready to play. And you have this kind of opportunity where Indian leaders are engaged very, very seriously. And then this visit, very hectic and hyperactive visit of Prime Minister, in that sense, reinforced India's being ready to play that role and coming upon
Absolutely.
expectations.
Indeed, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, whenever India has had the chance and been given the opportunity to lead, and it did so, India was given the chance in August to, preside over the Security Council, and the Prime Minister also chaired a meeting of the UNSC, and the government and the UNSC debate was about maritime security, and there was a statement also issued. So India has shown that we belong there, and we can actually lead, play a much greater role. It has to be given. How does it granted? That's the question.
I think it has to be taken rather than given.
Okay.
In international relations, nobody gives you anything for free. And I thought the Prime Minister's speech at the United Nations General Assembly was interesting. He almost sounded as if he was providing an implicit warning to the UN that if you don't reform, you will become irrelevant. I'm not putting words in his mouth, but it was something to that effect. And that is the position of India. I mean, I don't think India needs to make the case anymore. Everybody who's right-thinking will accept that India deserves to be in a reformed UN Security Council. What pains me is to see that this forum, this organization is not able to reform itself. So I think India will have to demonstrate through G20, through other invites at G7, through Quad and everything else that, listen, if the United Nations Security Council is not going to reform itself, the action will shift elsewhere. And India is perfectly capable of using minilaterals, plurilaterals, and other fora to get its objectives done. So I would not beg for it. I would not ask for it. But I think if it is not given to us, I think we should make sure.
There'll be a new world order. That's
absolutely. Thank you.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohan Kumar and Professor Swaran Singh, for putting into context the Prime Minister's successful visit to the United States. Moving on then to our next story. Prime Minister addressed issues from climate change to economic cleanliness in Mann Ki Baat, and this was the 81st edition of the Prime Minister's radio address. Here's more.
India is fully committed to take actions to tackle the climate change. Addressing the nation through his monthly radio program Mann Ki Baat, Prime Minister once again reiterated India's commitment to fight this problem. Prime Minister spoke about the significance of rivers and their contribution to provide all with the most essential natural resource, that is water. Prime Minister's address coincided with World Rivers Day that is observed on the 4th Sunday of September.
हमारे लिए नदियां एक भौतिक वस्तु नहीं है, हमारे लिए नदी एक जीवंत इकाई है। और तभी तो हम नदियों को मां कहते हैं। हम नदियों की सफाई और उन्हें प्रदूषण से मुक्त करने का काम सबके प्रयास और सबके सहयोग से कर ही सकते हैं।
Prime Minister Modi said that the Namami Gange campaign is making progress with collective efforts of all. He said a special e-auction is being held that pertains to gifts presented to him by people from time to time. The money that accrues through this is dedicated to the Namami Gange campaign.
ये इलेक्ट्रॉनिक नीलामी उन उपहारों की हो रही है जो मुझे समय समय पर लोगों ने दिए हैं। इस नीलामी से जो पैसा आएगा वो नमामि गंगे अभियान के लिए ही समर्पित किया जाता है। आप जिस आत्मीय भावना के साथ मुझे उपहार देते हैं, उसी भावना को ये अभियान और मजबूत करता है।
Prime Minister underlined the importance of rainwater harvesting in Indian culture.
हमारे हिंदुस्तान का जो पश्चिमी हिस्सा है, खास करके गुजरात और राजस्थान, वहाँ पानी की बहुत कमी है। कई बार अकाल पड़ता है और इसलिए वहाँ के समाज जीवन में एक नई परंपरा डेवलप हुई है। जैसे गुजरात में बारिश की शुरुआत होती है तो गुजरात में जल जीलनी एकादशी मनाते हैं। मतलब कि आज के युग में हम जिसको कहते हैं कैच द रेन, वो वही बात है कि जल के एक एक बिंदु को अपने में समेटना, जल जीलनी।
Prime Minister said the Jan Dhan accounts were started in the country to ensure that the rightful money of the poor is getting credited directly into their accounts. He added that technology can help in a great way in economic cleanliness. Prime Minister also mentioned Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay, Lal Bahadur Shastri and Mahatma Gandhi. He said from the life of Deen Dayal, people should learn a lesson to never give up. Bureau Report, DD India.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will launch the Ayushman Bharat digital mission on the 27th of September at 11 a.m. via video conferencing. And this will be followed by an address on the occasion. Currently, Ayushman Bharat digital mission is being implemented in pilot phase in 6 union territories. The nationwide rollout of the Ayushman Bharat digital mission, it coincides with the NHA celebrating its 3rd anniversary of Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. Now, the key components of the Ayushman Bharat digital mission include a health ID for every citizen that will also work as their health account, to which personal health records can be linked and viewed with the help of a mobile application. This mission will create interoperability within the digital health ecosystem, similar to the role played by the Unified Payments Interface in revolutionizing payments. Citizens will only be a click away from accessing healthcare facilities. Prime Minister, meanwhile, took to Twitter to say that the 27th of September is an important day for the country's healthcare sector. The Prime Minister further said that he will be launching the Ayushman Bharat digital mission at 11 a.m. on Monday, and he added that the mission leverages technology to improve the access to healthcare and opens doors for new innovation in the health sector. The Union Home Minister Amit Shah chaired a high-level meeting of chief ministers of 10 left-wing extremism-affected states. During the meeting, the Home Minister discussed in detail and reviewed the security situation in the border areas with the chief ministers. He also briefed about the anti-Naxal operations undertaken in these states. The cyclone Gulab's landfall process has begun. The India Meteorological Department upgraded its rainfall warning to red alert from orange for Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. The Indian Navy is on full alert, and the Eastern Naval Command and naval officers in charge of Odisha area have carried out preparatory activities to combat the effects of the cyclone. Gulab cyclone also made landfall 20 kilometers from Kalingapatnam in Andhra Pradesh. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to Odisha Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik. They discussed the cyclone situation. In a tweet, the Prime Minister said the centre has assured all possible support in overcoming the adversity. The Prime Minister prayed for the safety and well-being of everybody in the state of Odisha. The Prime Minister also spoke to Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Jagan Mohan Reddy and took stock of the situation arising in the wake of Cyclone Gulab in the state. The Prime Minister assured all possible support from the centre and prayed for everyone's safety and well-being. Well, Tapas Bhattacharya has the latest on the situation. Well, Tapas, what is the current situation with the cyclone? It's making landfall. How long will the process take, and what is the general outcome? Well, Tapas is trying to talk to us, and he's in the middle of the cyclone, joining us from Visakhapatnam. Tapas, can you hear me? Tapas, we can't hear you, so yeah, I can hear you now. Go ahead, so Tapas, yes.
Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Tapas.
Lovely.
Go ahead.
So, Mark, right now I'm in Visakhapatnam, and the landfall has actually started. We have been told by the DG IMD Mohapatra himself that the landfall has taken place close to 8:30 p.m. Tonight. and it has taken place 20 kilometers from Kalingapatnam, which is where the landfall has taken place. And right now I am in Visakhapatnam, where there is a massive amount of rainfall that is going on. I can tell you behind me, this is a huge, this particular landfall has made sure that the rainfall activity in Visakhapatnam and nearby areas has gone up manyfold. In fact, it is very difficult for me to stand here with this umbrella. The wind speed has gone up quite a bit. In fact, it is right now 70 kilometers per hour. We have been told by IMD department that it is currently blowing out, and such a difficult place right now.
Yes.
Especially the place where the landfall has taken place. We have been told that the massive evacuation has taken place, especially in the low-lying areas, as well as in the place where the landfall has supposed to take place. So the authorities are leaving no stone unturned. The wind speed, as you can very much
Yes,
see,
I can see.
it's so difficult for me to, in fact, hold this particular umbrella, and it is raining quite heavily right now. And what we've been told is that evacuation process has been going on now. It will take another few hours.
Yes.
What we've been told by the IMD department is that it will take another 6 hours before this landfall turns into a deep depression. And in the next 6 hours, it will turn into a deep depression, and the rainfall and the wind speed will come down. But in the next 2 to 3 hours, that's going to be a very crucial time when this rainfall activity as well as the wind speed will be at its maximum. It will be touching almost 70 kilometers per hour at some places, especially places where the landfall is happening. And the rescue efforts are very much on. The Eastern Command of the Indian Navy has also been chipped in. Also the NDRF team along with the State Department have been working day and night to make sure that no untoward incident takes place. Mark.
Yes, Tapas, you better get yourself to some safety, and thanks very much for giving us a live input from the middle of the cyclone. Moving on then to our next story. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has asked the Indian Bank Association to go digital, to do digitalized location-wise mapping, and this is for all bank branches in every district of the country. In her address to the 74th Annual General Meeting of the Indian Banks Association in Mumbai, the Finance Minister asked the IBA to decide where banks should have a physical presence and where they can serve customers even without a physical presence.
Request the IBA to access the digitized or the mapping of every district. It's not beyond you. I'm sure your SLBCs will be able to provide this for you. Get a digitized mapping of the branch and their location by district. You'll understand the large gaps which exist with absolutely no presence. The IBA, looking at this mapping by district of the presence of branches, should among you all decide where would you actually need to be physically present and where you still be able to do a good extensions of service without being physically mapped, but that should be your exercise.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman inaugurated a chalk at Pedder Road in Mumbai and unveiled a plaque in remembrance of the late Finance Minister Arun Jaitley. And the wife of Arun Jaitley, Sangeeta Jaitley, the leader of the opposition in Maharashtra, Devendra Fadnavis, were also present. Addressing the memorial event, Sitharaman termed Arun Jaitley as her guru, saying that Jaitley would help her whenever she needed any help or advice. The Union Information Broadcasting Minister, Anurag Singh Thakur, inspected the 13.5 Jojila tunnel. Speaking on the occasion, the minister said that this is an all-weather tunnel and has a strategic importance and shall also boost tourism. The minister said that the focus of the Modi government has always been on strengthening the road network in the border areas. This 13.5-kilometer long tunnel will play an important role in joining Srinagar-Kargil-Leh. National Highway Authority of India, Government of India are already rapidly working on its construction. It's work in progress. The minister also said that around 4,500 crore rupees will be spent on the project.
श्रीनगर से कारगिल और लेह को जोड़ने के लिए जोजिला टनल का बहुत महत्व है। राष्ट्र हित में, राष्ट्र सुरक्षा के लिए और 12 महीने इस क्षेत्र को जोड़ने के लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका निभाएगा। 4,500 करोड़ रुपए की लगभग इसके ऊपर लागत आएगी। 13.5 किलोमीटर लगभग ये लंबी सुरंग होगी और मुझे प्रसन्नता है इस पर काम तेजी से चल रहा है। और जैसे आज भी एक और ब्लास्ट किया गया इसके निर्माण के लिए, ये प्रयास किए जा रहे हैं कि जल्द से जल्द इसको पूरा किया जाए सारा साल, ताकि यहाँ से टूरिस्ट भी जा सके, सेना की मूवमेंट भी हो।
And the Union Sports Minister Anurag Singh Thakur laid the foundation stone of the Zonal Physical Education Office and Development of the Zonal Level Play Field in Kijpora Kangan, Union Territory in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Now the Union Minister also played volleyball with the players, and he said that the youngsters of Jammu and Kashmir have the capability of bringing many laurels to the country.
जम्मू कश्मीर में खेलों के प्रति यहाँ के युवाओं की कितनी रुचि है। अवसर मिले तो ये खिलाड़ी किसी भी हद तक खेलने के लिए तैयार हैं और मुझे इनमें भविष्य के ऐसे खिलाड़ी नजर आते हैं जो देश के लिए मेडल जीतेंगे भविष्य में। जरूरत है इनको सुविधाएं देने की। खेलों को लेकर जो जम्मू कश्मीर के युवाओं के बीच में रुचि है वो अभूतपूर्व है, एक अलग जोश है।
And let's take a look at the COVID situation in the country. Well, 85.6 crore vaccine doses have been administered so far nationwide in the vaccination drive. Well, the active cases, they account for less than 1% of the total cases, currently at 0.9%. India's active caseload stands at 3,03,476. A total of 28,326 new cases were reported in the last 24 hours, and the recovery rate stands at 97.77%. 26,032 recoveries were reported in the last 24 hours. So far, 56.32 crore tests have been conducted in the country. So India is all set to achieve the 100 crore vaccination mark, and to celebrate, the citizen engagement platform of the government, MyGov India, that is, has invited citizens to design an innovative and visually striking logo or mascot. So citizens can share their creative designs with them and win up to 25,000 rupees. The Germans went to the polls in an election that will change the face of Germany as well as Europe, because Angela Merkel, who has been the Chancellor, is preparing to leave office after 16 years in power. The polls are too close to call, with the SPD mounting a strong challenge to the retiring Chancellor Angela Merkel's Conservatives. It's time to say goodbye. And Aachen, Germany's gingerbread heartland, sweetened the departure of outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel with a goodbye heart cake. Merkel has been in power since 2005 but plans to step down after the election, making the vote an era-changing event to set the future course of Europe's largest economy. Polls opened all over Germany for the German national election on Sunday that looks too close to call, with the centre-left Social Democrats mounting a strong challenge to retiring Chancellor Angela Merkel's Conservatives. Candidates admitted it's a tight race, but each claimed victory.
It is an exciting day, and because it is such a tight race, every vote counts. Today is not the day for politicians to speak, but for the voters. Not a campaign day, but a day for the voters, and in a democracy, that is the most important day.
The weather is very good sign. I hope that as many citizens as possible to go to vote, cast their ballot and make possible what's on the horizon, particularly a strong result for the SPD, and that the citizens task me and being the next Chancellor of Germany.
Final opinion polls give the Social Democrats a narrow lead, but the Conservatives have reduced the gap in recent days, and many voters were still undecided. The most likely coalition scenarios see either the SPD or the Conservative CDU-CSU bloc whoever comes first, forming an alliance with the Greens and the Liberal Free Democrats, FDP. To win representation in Parliament as a group, a party needs to pass the 5% threshold or have 3 directly elected candidates. In total, there are 47 parties taking part in the election this year. A fractured electorate means that after the election, leading parties will sound each other out before embarking on more formal coalition negotiations. That could take months, leaving 67-year-old Merkel in charge in a caretaker role. After setbacks for a Christian Democratic Union party in regional elections, Merkel first announced in 2018 that she wouldn't seek re-election at the end of her current term. Under Merkel's watch, Germany became known as European Union's de facto leader, and the Chancellor will likely be remembered as a pragmatic leader with the ability to keep her job by striking political compromises. And Merkel in Germany, Europe and around the world has earned a reputation as an honest broker and a reliable partner. Even as she leaves office, Merkel has a favorable rating both within and outside Germany. Bureau Report, DD India. So that brings us to our second In Focus discussion, and this is it. We're looking at German polls and Merkel's legacy, and joining us is Professor Harshvardhan Pant, Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. So, Professor Pant, what is her legacy at home? We know that she's taken a lot of tough decisions. She's been a consensus builder. We've heard, the refugee crisis. She took a tough decision. She banned nuclear energy after Fukushima. And she's worked with the coalition, so many of the coalition partners feel they are going to be her rightful heirs. How do you look at that?
Well, I think she has been an extraordinary leader in extraordinary times, at a time when, very few leaders command the kind of support that she does, even as she leaves office. And at a time when there has been so much dysfunctionality around the world. Germany under Merkel looked like a steadfast country, a country that can give leadership in Europe and can come to terms with the changing realities around Europe. And so as she leaves office after 16 years, she's leaving behind a big vacuum, a big void. And it would be very difficult for anyone to fill it within Europe itself, because I think now Europe also finds itself in a precarious situation with economic crisis, health crisis, relations with China turning into a difficult phase, and with the transatlantic relationship also not being very healthy at this point with what has happened with AUKUS and others. So I think, if you look at the challenges that Europe is facing, someone who had been in office now for 16 years, perhaps you would think that that person should have continued for more, just to give continuity. But now as she leaves, I think she's leaving behind shoes that are too big to fill.
And she has a favorable rating both within her country and outside amongst the world leaders. She's considered one of the better world leaders. So her legacy abroad is also pretty good. But the question is that she was the undisputed leader of the EU. Now what happens in the EU?
Absolutely, and I think there has been some suggestions that the French president is trying, Emmanuel Macron is trying to fill, is trying to come into a position, but it's extremely difficult because given Merkel's legacy of so many years, 16 years, she was able to enter into compromises, build coalitions with the countries, and even at times take decisions which, at that particular point in time, would have looked very radical. For example, the issue when she was trying to resolve the 2008 financial crisis, Greece became so annoyed and angry by her decisions that Greece wanted to leave European Union. And I think that is, that kind of consternation and the way she handled it and managed it both then and then. You had the refugee crisis, which she handled with a certain degree of dexterity, that I think would be very difficult for anyone to fill, given the short durations that we have for the leaders involved. And Mr. Macron himself is going to be, would be facing elections very soon in a matter of I think a year and a half. So I think the challenge for Europe and European Union is how do you reposition yourself at a time of great churn in political leadership? And unless you have someone who is there for a while, and as the polls suggest in Germany, it's too close to call at this point. I think that political uncertainty can cast a shadow over future decisions of the European Union.
But what do you think of the future of Germany? Because it's always been, you know, through coalitions. She has been that sort of a consensus builder, and working with, you know, people who were actually opposed to her in many ways. The Social Democrats, you know, versus the Christian Democrats. And now the Social Democrats are claiming that they are the rightful heirs. How would you see this? You know, I mean, are they likely to take everyone along the way she did?
I think it would depend on the numbers they would get. It seems that it's a very tight race. So whoever wins will inevitably have to come to terms with this reality that it's a fractured verdict that has been given by the German electorate. And at the end, if you saw, I think Social Democrats were actually the leading in the leading position, and the Conservatives had to use Angela Merkel in their campaign in the last few days to shore up their support base. So I think there is a lot of genuine support and warmth for Angela Merkel and her leadership. So it would be very difficult for the Social Democrats to completely ignore the legacy of Merkel, and they will have to build on it if the race is this close. But I think what it also tells you is that in Germany, the differences between the two political parties are still not that high. The polarization is not that complete as you see in other democracies in Europe and in America. So perhaps that kind of coalition building approach that has been institutionalized by Merkel can be carried forward, and perhaps that would be good for Germany and Europe.
Indeed, and that sort of coalition and consensus building is necessary for the whole of Europe. And we see that, you know, now with developments like AUKUS, does, you know, what sort of a shadow does that cast on European politics and the manner in which Europe deals with the US and Britain, which is now not a part of the European Union?
I think foreign policy is something that Europe will have to now focus on. European Union will have to focus on, and we know that Germans have also expressed their displeasure at the way AUKUS was announced. And I think there has been this legacy issue. Europeans had complained in the past that Mr. Trump was the one who was unilateral, but it turns out that Mr. Biden is also unilateral. He also did not give them any indication of withdrawal from Afghanistan, and now with AUKUS was a surprise for everyone. And the French are, of course, looking at it as a stab in the back, but Germans are unhappy, and larger Europeans are unhappy. But the reality is that Europe and European Union have been missing in action on strategic matters globally. And I think if they want to come back, if they want to be part of this strategic discussion, what is happening in the Indo-Pacific, they will have to be more robust. And we have seen that discussion happening about European defense policy, autonomous European defense capability, which is something that French are very keen on, but Angela Merkel was reluctant. So it would be interesting to see the new German chancellor, how far he or she would be willing to go with this idea that French are proposing, because that would be completely distinct in terms of German identity post-Second World War. And that is something that I think we would have to look out for.
Professor Harshvardhan Pant, thank you very much for joining us. Moving on then to our next story. Iceland has elected a female majority parliament, a landmark for gender equality in the North Atlantic island nation. In a vote that saw centrist parties make the biggest gains. After all votes were counted on Sunday, female candidates held 33 seats in Iceland's 63-member parliament. Now, Iceland's ruling left-right coalition, it strengthened its majority during the national election, which was held on Saturday, despite the Prime Minister, Katrin Jakobsdóttir, losing ground. The final results show this on Sunday. The opinion polls had forecast that the coalition would fall short of a majority, but the surge in support for the centre-right Progressive Party, which won 5 more seats than in 2017, pushed its total count to 37 seats in the 63-member parliament. So according to the state broadcaster, this is RUV. These are the figures that we are quoting to you. Israeli troops killed at least 4 Hamas militants in gun battles during raids on Sunday against one of the group's cells in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Health Ministry said that 3 Palestinians were killed in the West Bank village of Beit Anan, which was northwest of Jerusalem, and another Palestinian was killed in Burkin, which is a village near the Palestinian city of Jenin. Now, the Israeli military, the spokesperson there, has said that the troops carried out 5 raids in the West Bank in order to stop a Hamas terrorist organization cell from operating and launching attacks. The Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, has said that the operation was aimed against Hamas's men about to carry out terrorist attacks. As many as 3 people have been killed and nearly 50 others injured after 5 cars of an Amtrak train derailed in north-central Montana. There were approximately 147 passengers and 13 crew members aboard the Empire Builder train when it derailed near Joplin. It was headed for Seattle from Chicago. The cause of the incident was immediately unknown. So soon after the derailment, people who were trapped aboard were taken off the train, but the state senator Steve Daney said that he was closely monitoring this situation. That concludes this bulletin, News Night. Thank you very much for being with us. Namaskar.